his appointment on the 2nd of October 2012. Those appointed comprise Aminu Umar Sadiq, who is currently an executive director and head of infrastructure as a new MD and CEO, Kolawole Owodunmi, executive director, and BC Makoju, executive director, all of the NSIA. Section 16, subsection 3 of the NSIA Establishment Act 2011 specifies that this for the replacement of OG, the MD, and the executive directors. They are all expected to help steer and transform the investment and infrastructure industry and propel the sector to a high pedestal. And so how much is the Naira exchanging for the currencies? Let's find out. Now we move straight to our focus for this episode of the program. Wealth creation in some schools of thought is described as an activity that is brought about by owning several streams of passive or active revenue sources. So essentially, wealth creation results from either increasing your income, adding an extra source, making high-yield investments, or even through savings. However, regardless of how you get there, one thing is certain, which is the fact that yes, the person I'm talking about this morning, you're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you, Leanne.
And nice to have you again on the program. Yes. So perhaps we'll begin the conversation by you telling us, essentially, when we say wealth, money on the other hand, what does it mean?
Oh, okay, thank you once again. I think before we start to talk about the differences, let's talk about the similarities. The first thing is wealth and money. There is still value. There are also a means of exchange. Wealth in itself is an all-encompassing exercise, while money is just a subset of wealth. So you've given your definition, which is fantastic, and you allow me to give my own. It's an extended network of riches, connections, and interactions. And when I say that, you're talking about social capital, you're talking about financial capital, you're talking about human capital, you're talking about national network. You've spoken about that, investments, money, savings, and all of that. You talk about human capital, that's the capabilities, the competencies, the skills, the talent, because nobody, you're talking about the territorial integrity of investments on passive and active income.
So how vital is it for
it? As a human being, say, then of course a nation and human, let's take it to at the point of you've got the capabilities, money at the end of the day. Now, businesses to work somewhere else, competent people, the natural capital, you could do your 9 to 5. That is also from 9 to 5, which you don't get to worry about as an experience that
usually terrains. Where should we gravitate towards in terms of keeping ourselves intact and earning income?
Okay, thank you once again. One, in this tough time, there are two things that you need to be grounded. You have to be multi-skilled, and you have to be multi-talented, like I mentioned earlier on. As of today, inflation rate stands at 19.6%. You have unemployment at 33%.
Above 20.
You have youth employment in all of it. That means on a stream of income. And when you look at that income stream, what are we talking about? We're talking about you need to have your investment opportunity and competencies. That's economy. The gift, it is as a full staff you can open them to insurance, health care, and all of that. And they get to work more, but the bottom line is that they're putting food on the table and they're making things happen. Like in Nigeria now, the gig economy has expanded so much that even the Generation Z, that means the new people that they don't want to relax and get to spend another time and all of that. But so they have their time for themselves and they can actually do a whole lot of things. And of course, that is making up. What will I do? Take a 2-hour break and do some increase your social network. You see opportunities of getting an extra. Your social they is saturated. In fact, we've been talking about downsizing the civil service because of the overbloated costs and all of that. I envision that there must be publications for based on referral. So to be opportune into
person actually, because I get to meet some people, but I'm not don't need any advertisement.
And that's a huge interaction that is asked of people. A developing nation, you might be doing yourself, or the amount of time you spend on social platforms you want to operate in, and the forums. Almost every kind of business space, they share knowledge, they share jobs, opportunities, and they share experience too. So if you are having challenges, even in your finances, if you have challenges getting work, if you're trying to actually experience that before, and share, in as much as there's a whole lot of information on the internet, but of course you need to sieve the one that suits you, especially when it comes to investment. I'm sure you heard a lot about Ponzi schemes. You see saving schemes that promise magical returns.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you the role of perhaps financial advisor, and how people will be able to acquire the requisite knowledge and knowing where to invest and where not to invest.
Fantastic. One is the issue of investments. Of course, would ideally situation and what had actually hit you before could actually direct or inform you of your investment decisions. Of course, if there are so many investment houses, the traditional commercial banks, traditional asset management companies, the normal investment companies and investors, and there are as many as this sand of the seashore, so you still have to really consult more and get more. So the point is that while there are traditional or certified investors, not all investment opportunities actually turn out well. So it still boils down to you being lucky in some point and being knowledgeable, and of course consulting with other investments to learn. Obviously,
is everyone wired to be an entrepreneur?
Not everybody is wired to be an entrepreneur, because entrepreneur is a risk taker. Not everybody has that aptitude for risk taking, and not everyone could take initiatives, because it takes a whole lot of initiative to become an entrepreneur. There's things that stand out as an entrepreneur. Humility. If you are not humble, you cannot be an entrepreneur. If you're not service oriented entrepreneur, and pockets, you cannot be an entrepreneur.
Good thing to hear. But we'll be ending this conversation now, I'm told, and I must sincerely thank you, Mr. Kolawole, for coming on the program.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for coming. So next is our Surviving COVID-19 series, as put together by Aisha Musa.
Partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
There are no customer with coronavirus. Before the corona, I can get a 30 customer or 50 customer, etc., etc. And then during the transport, the many even the other country like they are coming here when they come to Nigeria. When the customers were 23,000, in that period there are no money for the customers. That is the problem. If I get it, I can buy the many fabric. Somebody sometimes the customers come and ask why this kind of material like this one, because I don't have money. How can I go off to like such me or many Nigerians or 2,000? That is the key to buy something. We'll keep it.
Partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
All right, now let's take a trip to the commodities market. Global market activities as presented by Pastor Abel.
Pacific shares traded percent to close at 20. Milan, Shanghai Composite and the Hang Seng Index are on the negative territory. European stocks advanced on Tuesday, building on gains seen in yesterday's trading session. DAX, FTSE and CAC 40 are on the positive lane. Stock futures in the United States rose following a broad rally on the first trading day of October, a sharp turn from September, which brought the worst month since March 2020 for the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500. Futures tied to the S&P 500 increased more than 1%. Nasdaq 100 futures up 1.22%. Futures for the Dow Jones Industrial Average were up 247 points. For African stocks, South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 and Namibia's overall index opened positive, while other stocks are yet to post new figures. Boss Sedi Able, Business Express.
And this is where we draw the curtains on this episode of the program. Don't forget you can access all previous episodes on YouTube on the NTA's channel. You can also communicate with us via our various social media platforms. Business Express returns Wednesday at 3 p.m. My name is Leah Katumba Batunde saying have a blessed day, be safe out there, and God bless Nigeria.
With the nervous system, and for the brain to function optimally, there is need for proper care, especially feeding. But what happens when we feed the brain with wrong substance? It gets negatively rewired. Even our children are affected. How did our society sink deep into it? Can we step out of this? Join the conversations on NTA Network this Wednesday, October 5th, 2022 at
If you get to see the way telling about the post this, don't forget to send in your messages.
There's a difference between chicken, chow, and fish. That's really cool. The idea could be like Jahaluka. That is
So you take water before you walk out.
people have used that for religion TikTok to those that
Like the protection.
a lot of people don't even have resources.
I'm Cecil, and this is the Medley Show on NTA.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spill the arrogance of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision.
No matter where you come from, no matter your religion, we are one. Let's live together. Let's not fight in each other. Let us live as one. It doesn't matter where you come from, white or religion, man, woman or child. It doesn't matter who you are. Nigerian first. No matter where you come from, no matter your religion, we are one. Let's live together. How can we develop when we're always in crisis? Finally, something wrong with you, kids and young free. No matter all differences, truth and understanding. No matter where you come from, no matter your religion, we are one. Let's be together.
This is the network service of the NTA.
The Supreme Court upheld last month's presidential election. We look at election petitions and their role in improving political processes on the continent. The United Nations issues a final warning about the famine in Somalia. We talk to experts on why drought is a persistent problem in the Horn of Africa. And welcome. The 7-judge Supreme Court dismissed all claims by opposition leader Raila Odinga and confirmed William Ruto's presidential victory. The Apex Court judges ruled, among other issues, that Ruto met the 50% plus one.
This is the network service of the NTA. We now please stay tuned.
President Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, sir, we are gathered today for the fourth to the government of the Federation, partnership from the joint matriculation, and you have graced this occasion with your presence in these 4 years. We thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, without wasting government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, as he comes to make his introductory remarks. Mr. Boss Mustafa, sir.
Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Inspector General of Police, DG NIA of the ICP occasion, Professor, government partners, members of the diplomat, diminishing corruption, organized by the ICPC in collaboration with the Joint Admission Federation. Again, welcome His Excellency, Mr. President, and other distinguished dignitaries to this official occasion. This occasion of the 4th National Summit on Diminishing Corruption in the Public Sector is promising because of exemplary leadership against energy and direction of Mr. President's resolute effort at combating corruption has been inspirational. You all agree with me that corruption has had a protracted and vast impact on the state of the economy, security, and breakdown of ethical values prior to the coming of the President in 2019 is consistent and strengthening other anti-corruption agencies for the incremental efforts made against corruption and other related crimes. This year's theme is very significant because of the centrality of education in the production of knowledge and personnel required for innovative public sector governance and for the transformation of society. The theme is even more appropriate because corruption is eroding the practical purpose of education at all levels, primary, secondary, and tertiary. It is an undeniable fact that education is meant to make people fully human, create a learning and problem-solving society, help in the realization of citizens' potentials that combines both intelligence and character, and a tool for reform. However, research shows that the education sector is paradoxically playing a major role as enabler of corruption in Nigeria. Education is supposed to be a panacea to corruption, but alas, it is apparent that students, teachers, administrators, and government agencies responsible for education have somewhat become permeable to corruption, and corrupt practices has become endemic within the sector. This administration is very much aware that there is need for the commitment of stakeholders in the sector to take anti-corruption initiatives more seriously and deploy them to tackle corrupt practices. The National Ethics and Integrity Policy remains a tool for all stakeholders in the education sector to collaborate on a consistent basis with anti-corruption agencies, most especially the ICPC, on mechanisms for corruption prevention. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, you would agree with me that the purpose of education cannot be realized without anti-corruption. What we are experiencing today at the Joint Admission and Matriculation Board JAM under the leadership of Professor Ishak Oloyede is a good example of leadership anti-corruption. We need more of such in the entire education sector. It is the determination of the present administration to use anti-corruption measures to improve the human and institutional governance structures generally, and in the education sector in particular, for the realization of enhancing the productive capacity in terms of the nation on a continuous basis. On this note, permit me to again congratulate the ICPC for its persistent intellectual and innovative effort at preventing corruption. This effort is consistent with Mr. President's vision against corruption. Also worthy of congratulations at the JAM for partnering in this venture. I also congratulate the 2022 Integrity Awardee, who will enjoy the rare opportunity of presidential recognition from an African icon of anti-corruption. Finally, let me reiterate that anti-corruption is a collective endeavor. Hence, it requires all citizens and stakeholders to play their role by supporting anti-corruption agencies to fight the menace of corruption while making personal and institutional effort at combating it. I thank you for your kind attention, and once more, welcome.
Thank you very much, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to make his remarks. The Chairman of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, Professor Bolaji Owasoye, SAN, who after making his presentation will also make a presentation of a gift to His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Professor Owasoye, sir.
Your Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, all other protocols duly observed. Sir, on behalf of the board and the officers of the ICPC, JAMB and the OSGF, we want to welcome you to this event. Sir, your presence at each of the 4 national summits that we have organized since 2019 is a reflection of your commitment to fight corruption as one of the significant developmental global challenges of our time. This year, We have chosen the theme of corruption and the education sector because corruption in education has been rightly described as stealing the future. Education being the medium for transmission of knowledge and values. Once the education sector is corrupted, the foundation for future ethical leadership and the labor force is destroyed. Corruption in education manifests in different ways, such as recruitment of unqualified or unfit persons to teach at primary, secondary, or tertiary levels, admission racketeering, exam malpractice, diversion of revenue for and within the sector, the operation of illegal academic institutions, especially at tertiary level, the abuse of power and procurement rules by the management and governing councils, both of academic or regulatory institutions, etc. In response to the recent epidemic of sexual harassment in the education sector, ICPC has constituted a special team on investigation and prosecution of sexual harassment in secondary and tertiary institutions. In collaboration with civil society, we're in the process of introducing a model policy on sexual harassment for academic institutions to adopt. We have also secured some major convictions, including that of a professor. Your Excellency, ICPC has escalated its prevention mandate in the face of very costly, time-consuming, and unpredictable outcomes of investigation and prosecution. In this regard, we're strengthening the Anti-Corruption and Transparency Monitoring Unit in NDAs. For the education sector, we collaborated with other institutions, including the NUC and the MBTE, and much more recently with JAMB, our co-host for this event. With JAMB and DSS, we conducted last year a series of undercover operations across the country on corruption in the university admission processes, leading to the busting of syndicates and the arrest of its leaders responsible for compromising the IGMB and JUPEP. As is now widely publicized, ICPC has intensified its scrutiny of personnel and capital cost of MDAs, leading to a proactive restraining of surpluses or duplications in the budget. Just last week, the Commission, in collaboration with the Budget Office and stakeholders, met with some MDAs on the recurring surpluses in their payroll to determine proactive measures towards improving the budget process. This is to enable us to separate outright fraud from administrative lapses. We also actively reviewed the budget to prevent abuse by senior civil servants and politically exposed persons who sometimes personalize the budgetary allocation for direct benefit. In one case, a politically exposed person successfully increased the budget of an agency in order for the agency to buy a property from him. In another case, the politically exposed person inserted soft projects worth over 7 billion for a catchment population of about 1 million people in the name of empowerment. Both cases are under investigation. ICPC's review of special funds that are meant to improve education delivery, such as the Universal Basic Education and TET Fund, reveals continued abuses and breach of procurement standards and compromise of statutory mandates. While a system study and review of SUBEB in 6 states for 2019 and 2020 revealed that the intention of the Universal Basic Education Law to support states to improve basic education is frustrated by lack of commitment by state governments in not providing matching grants, amongst other defaults. The capacity and the commitment of states and of tertiary institutions to access UBE and TET Fund respectively, as anticipated by law, remains highly questionable. In support of the government's effort to improve revenue generation, the Commission continues to investigate the diversion of tax and other statutory revenues as part of routine investigation, and so far this year we've recovered 1.26 billion. As part of the efforts to sanitize the public service and upscale integrity, the Commission has been collaborating with the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation to flush out fake appointments and screen candidates for appointment to position of permanent secretaries, amongst other initiatives. Our findings thus far indicate that many prospective appointees are implicated for financial impropriety, corrupt practice, failure of code of conduct standards, and substance abuse. The commitment of the head of service to clean up the stable by effective pre-appointment screening is commendable, and ICPC will continue to play its part in this regard. Sir, we are vigorously exploiting technology solutions to some of the systemic corruption that we have unearthed. For example, in collaboration with NIDA, we held a hackathon some few weeks ago with youths on innovative responses to the Unity Schools feeding type of corruption that we unearthed during COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. The winning entry will be used for a pilot program to improve transparency in Unity Schools feeding program, and even the homegrown school feeding program under the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management. To further strengthen government's contracting and procurement processes, we recommend a mandatory anti-corruption clause for all government contracts with private entities. Such entities must commit to implement anti-corruption compliance programs within their entities. Failure to do so should result not just in prosecution where appropriate, but claims in damages for government for breach of contract. In a similar vein, the Commission is working on contract negotiation guidelines for government officers to set boundaries and to avoid corrupt, odious, and inimical clauses to public interest, as witnessed in the public examples of the P&ID case and the Paris Club refund disputes. Once completed, these negotiation guidelines will be forwarded to the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation for his attention. Part of ICPC's core mandate is citizen mobilization and public enlightenment, in furtherance of which Mr. President graciously approved the National Ethics and Integrity Policy via the FEC meeting in August 2020. To implement its core values and citizen behavior change, we commenced dissemination and stakeholder solicitation with National Orientation Agency in January 2021. And so far, we have held over 30 sessions across Nigeria with traditional rulers, religious leaders, professional bodies, civil society, media, and other stakeholders. Furthermore, we have infused behavior change subject into our training activities and capacity building in our academy. Your Excellency, corruption has fought back in different ways: by attack on the chairman, the board, the management, and the officers of ICPC, including threats of physical or psychological attacks, blackmail, sponsored campaigns of calumny, mobilization of political figures to cut down our powers and our budget, infiltration of the Commission by fifth columnists, compromise of unethical staff, etc. In all of this, we have remained resolute on our mandate and our promise to Mr. President and the nation to do our best. We hereby renew that pledge. As in the past 3 years, we shall be inviting Your Excellency to present the Public Service Integrity Award to Superintendent of Police Daniel Itse Ama, a distinguished public servant who against all odds has refused to be corrupted. We are particularly delighted that the awardee is from the Nigerian police, an institution often much derided, maligned, and underappreciated. Recall, sir, that in 2021, one of the awardees was also a police officer. We want to commend the IGP for producing these beacons of light in a desert of despair. I want to thank JAMB through its registrar for this collaboration and for the mutual benefit to our institutions and our country. We also wish to thank the SGF, Mr. Boss Gida Mustafa, for being exemplary in public service. He has consistently provided leadership, not just for this summit, but in other areas of governance. We know, sir, that this is your last summit with us as SGF. As you proceed, God will open new vistas of leadership for you as we are persuaded that for you the best is yet to come. For us, once a boss, always the boss. Thank you very much, sir. Finally, Your Excellency, Mr. President, you have in recent public statements expressed the desire to retire to Daura. In this regard, I want to acknowledge that this summit is also your last. On behalf of the ICPC, the EFCC, the Code of Conduct Bureau, and all other anti-corruption bodies in this country, we want to thank you for making it easy for us by your principle of non-interference. I want to particularly publicly, sir, I want to publicly thank you for the support the ICPC has received from you to discharge the statutory mandate without let or hindrance. Your position has strengthened us to perform despite the chronic persistence of corruption fighting back and the weak societal appreciation of the insidious paralyzing effects of corruption. Your Excellency, you have been a champion of anti-corruption in Nigeria, in Africa, and the diaspora. Our prayer for you is that the years ahead of you will be spent in good health and peace of mind. We hope that your successor will sustain this tempo for the sake of Nigeria. On your part, Mr. President, we can confirm, in the words of Julius Caesar, Veni, Vidi, Vici. You came, you saw, and you conquered. So in appreciation of your leadership, we shall be presenting you, on behalf of the ICPC, a plaque and a painting. The painting, sir, is very special, as it was made by one of our officers, Maman Kuru John. Maman, if you are in the auditorium, can you stand up? Good. Maman Kuru John is not just an investigator, but a creative talent. He used the most recent and modern mode of painting called impacto by splashing colors on canvas to form an image. It is a metaphor for bringing order out of chaos, as you have tried to do with governance in Nigeria. We want to thank you, Your Excellency. We're grateful. Godspeed to you in your future aspirations, whatever those may be. Thank you, sir.
You can also download the iOS or Apple app with your mobile phone toward NTA International That anywhere the world.
Thank you, the chairman of the ICPC, Professor Bolaji Owasonye. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I at this point respectfully call on the Honorable Minister of Education, Malam Adamu, as he comes to give a goodwill message. Honorable Minister, sir.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to stand before you to give this goodwill message in solidarity with the organizers of this very, very important summit. So, at the beginning, I'd like you to permit me to commend the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, ICPC, for their consistency in continually conducting this annual conference since 2019. And this time I'm particularly delighted that they are focusing on education. I don't even know why they say corruption in the education sector, not corruption in the education sector. But probably they will just take them together. And I'm also happy they have been doing this together with the Office of the Secretary to Government. This time, and the first time they are doing it, they decided to do it in conjunction with an agency of government, and they decided to choose JAM. We'd like to thank you very much, and I would like to tell you, as you are no doubt aware, that JAM is without doubt one of the parastatals of the federal government, which has, under, as the chairman himself said, under the leadership of Professor Ishaq Olowede, achieved something that no other agency in recent times has achieved. So, it has extended the boundaries of transparency and accountability in the conduct of its business. It is therefore only right that the 2022 National Summit on Diminishing Corruption in the Public Sector not only showcases experiences of such agencies, but also draws attention to potential pitfalls that might be encountered in the continued pursuit of eradicating corruption from our society. And I would like you to permit me to use this podium to publicly appreciate the ICPC itself and its chairman, Professor Bolaji Wasanoye, for what he has turned the organization to be. We have already thanked the President, and I would like also, in addition, thank the President for what he has done by supporting. It is just not the anti-corruption agencies that were supported by the President without interference. This is the style of Mr. President. He has never interfered in anything any of his subordinates are doing. I believe in particular the chairman of the ICC, I thank him for synergizing at all times with the Federal Ministry of Education in curbing all corrupt practices and in helping any time we turn to him. The ICPC has consistently adapted multifaceted approaches to tackling corruption, including the preventive approach, which education and general enlightenment represent. And as he has said, and I will say it again, corruption is a real or the final or the ultimate manifestation of the failure of education, because education actually is not the imparting of facts or figures or theories or even practice. Education is the building of character. And you know, when there is corruption, it means character is totally absent. And when character is absent, there is just no education. So we are very happy that you are focusing on this. And my appeal to ICPC and EFCC and anybody who will be fighting corruption in Nigeria is to deepen what Mr. President has done. I hope the next president, whoever is going to be, will try to focus relentlessly and attack systemic corruption. Because this government has done its best. It has fought the corruption that has been caught. But the corruption that has not been caught is there, imperceptibly creating havoc beneath the surface. Systemic corruption must be fought if Nigeria is to be liberated. It is disturbing to note, however, that despite all the effort that government has been doing, corruption continues to be a major impediment to sustainable nation building. It engenders poor education outcomes for us. It undermines the production of competent and ethical individuals who constitute the foundation of human capital development globally. Corruption erodes trust in our communal life and it stains our character. As a matter of fact, the object of education is the formation of character, as I said. And if it is missing, everything is missing. This explains why the federal government is committed to combating corruption and promoting the virtues of honesty,
probity in the administration of education in our country. While corrupt practices continue to be sanctioned, virtues such as integrity, transparency, honesty, competence must be, and as we see now, they are being rewarded. As someone is going to be rewarded today, I hope it will be a very good example for this nation. And as the speaker said, he is coming from an area that is much maligned. So which means actually differences can be made in all sectors, no matter how bad they are perceived to be. It is noteworthy that all our institutions have developed robust policies on combating corruption after the advent of this administration. For the education sector, even recently, the National Assembly enacted the Anti-Sexual Harassment Bill 2020, which criminalizes solicitation of sexual gratification for undue favors in our educational institutions. There are also laws and policies against different types of corruption, and it is in the interest of every stakeholder in education to ensure compliance. I'm sorry, please, they said I have 5 minutes, that's why I'm just hurrying, but I have so much to say. And in line with what President Muhammad Buhari's commitment to fighting corruption does, and he is being re-emphasized, I want to reiterate the support and collaboration of the Federal Ministry of Education in ensuring that corruption is reduced to the barest minimum in education, if not totally eliminated. The education sector remains a focal point of the Buhari administration, just as the fight against corruption remains one of its cardinal principles. Let me affirm that the Federal Ministry of Education and its agencies shall not relent in their effort to sensitize people on the negative effects of corruption in our society and on our national identity and our development efforts. In the circumstances, we shall, among other measures, do the following. Always strengthen existing measures that are designed to punish and prevent the perpetration of all acts of corruption. Employ specific auditing techniques and procedures at all levels of our sector to discourage and sometimes punish grafts. Strengthen guidelines and procedures that will ensure and assure compliance with global best practices in all our educational institutions. Deploy the likes of participatory budgeting, public expenditure tracking systems, social audits, and other accountability promoting tools, other public financial reform techniques in our fight against corruption. We will also use all available avenues, including social media, to mobilize our people to support government. I would like to wish you very successful deliberations, and I would like to again reiterate my call to the next government. Without the fight or final defeat of corruption, believe me, we are just going to lose everything. And Nigeria has a very, very, very bad and to me well-deserved reputation of being a very, very corrupt society. Nobody is going to change it except us. And you know, we just have to be sincere with ourselves. Many times people will just stand condemning corruption while the next moment they will engage in it. So we have to be serious and sincere with ourselves. Otherwise, this nation is doomed. I congratulate the ICPC and the President. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Minister of Education. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am going to, in a short while, call on the keynote speaker, Professor Attahiru Jega. Professor Attahiru Jega was a one-time president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities in Nigeria, a one-time vice chancellor of the Bayero University, Kano, and immediate past chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission. Professor Jega is a renowned scholar, astute administrator, and he has demonstrated integrity in the conduct of elections. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to call on Professor Atahiru Jega as he comes to talk to us on the theme, corruption and the education sector. Professor Jega, sir.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to deliver this keynote address at this 4th National Summit on diminishing corruption in the public sector. It is an honor which I gladly accepted, and I'm glad to be here with you today. Corruption in the education sector in Nigeria is no doubt a serious matter that needs thorough interrogation for it to be resolved and addressed appropriately. Given the time available to me, I may not do more than barely scratch the surface of the formidable challenges associated with corruption in the education sector, or indeed corruption and the education sector. Perhaps only a commissioned research project will do justice to the issues. Mr. President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Nigeria has unenviably been dubbed as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. It is also said to be one of the world's most complex corruption environments, and it is perennially ranked in the bottom quartile of the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. We may quarrel with how Transparency International measures corruption or the criteria it uses. Unfortunately, the perception has been created in the Committee of Nations that we are one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And as we all know, perception can sometimes be more dangerous than the reality. This means, therefore, we have to do everything possible to address corruption in all its dimensions. This relatively very poor record and ranking is essentially on account of the humongous corruption associated with what is known about the Nigerian public sector, especially at the federal level, but also across all tiers of study. It has been observed that corruption is the single greatest obstacle preventing Nigeria from achieving its enormous potential. It drains billions of dollars a year from the country's economy, stymies development, and weakens the social contract between the government and its people. And Nigerians struggle daily to cope with its effects. Also, in that recent study, 20 overarching contexts and sectors that are especially vulnerable to corruption in Nigeria have been identified, as well as 28 corruption tactics in 8 behavioral categories. This document succinctly highlights the extent and magnitude, as well as the multifarious dimensions of corruption in the Nigerian political economy. But there is no time to go into all this, but it's a report that I highly recommend to those who are interested to know the details. No doubt, the endemic and pervasive nature of corruption in Nigeria negatively impacts human security, as well as democratic and socio-economic development. This is essentially because the nature, extent, and dimensions of corruption are no doubt associated with bad governance and the inadequacy of institutional framework to effectively address it. Hence, public officials occupying public offices in trust regrettably convert those for private gain, often with impunity and disregard for due process, accountability, and ethical conduct. It is no doubt noteworthy that a lot has been done, especially by the ICPC, EFCC, and other institutions, and I must say they have done this very commendably since 2015 to tackle corruption in the Nigerian public sector. But a lot more still needs to be done. Efforts need to be redoubled, lessons ought to have been learned, strategies need to be reviewed and re-strategized, and more sophisticated weapons in court need to be acquired and deployed to kill corruption. For, as Mr. President was reported to have said several years back, if we do not kill corruption, corruption will kill us or kill Nigeria. So ultimately, corruption decisively and impactfully, if not permanent, Nigerian public sector would require remarkable systemic value at our governance and to our democratic time and correction. We need to systems and accelerate them is no doubt help improve education sector. And I will focus my attention on that, and I will try to do that very briefly because of the time factor. But let me say globally, power for private gain is the abuse of entrusted power with sector. And the second way is to look at the way and manner by which corruption, and I am not going to waste time on that, but it's important to recognize that when we talk about public sector, it ranges, education sector, it ranges from the primary to secondary to post-secondary. And I have provided statistics in the paper which I believe will be circulated so that we can understand the extent of the growth of our education sector. But the point I want to emphasize is that the Nigerian education sector, especially the tertiary education component of this sector, and particularly the universities, has grown phenomenally, especially since the early 2000s, when it was widely opened up for private sector investment and participation. Ironically, it was a case of rapid expansion and growth without, in my view, adequate planning, financing, and careful, effective regulation. With the result that there has been a remarkable expansion of enrollment in spite of the almost exponential increase in the number of institutions. But the two issues related to education, access and quality, have been compromised because of this phenomenal growth without careful planning. And I think a lot of the so-called crisis in the education sector in Nigeria, particularly in the tertiary education sector, is attributable to this phenomenal expansion without careful planning and without adequate control. There are two broad dimensions, as I mentioned, of corruption in the education sector, one within, one without, as it impacts. So specifically, with regards to corruption within the education sector, I would like to say as follows.
As is the case within all sectors of the Nigerian political economy, education sector is continuously being perforated from within by incidences of corruption and the consequences of this. And from the primary to the tertiary levels of education provisioning, there are significant numbers and indicators of corruption which really abound. Any discussion of the Nigerian education sector invariably focuses on the social laboratories and the poor quality of teachers. But I think what is often not recognized by primary to tertiary educational institutions, and this left is key: nepotism, management staff, absenteeism by both management staff and the teaching and the other staff, extortion of money from students and parents, either for admission or for grades or even for issuance of transcripts, certificate racketeering, exploitation of students, whether sexually or in many other ways. All these are incidences of corruption which abound, which are documented, and they cut across the entire education system. The type of corruption which is most pervasive and prevalent at the primary and secondary levels is what Transparency International calls petty corruption, and the World Bank calls it quiet corruption. And these are notably bribery and maladaptive practices, such as absenteeism or what we call gift giving, but which we can try to rationalize through cultural practices, but which really have serious negative consequences on education delivery in terms of quality and in terms of access. In fact, according to Transparency International, using 2013 figures, 47% of all public sector institutions in sub-Saharan Africa are affected by this petty corruption. And I think regrettably Nigeria also tops the rank in terms of incidences of these in our educational institutions. On the other hand, in the tertiary education institutions, prevalent and pervasive corrupt practices include deals with contractors and suppliers to rig contracts, extortion of contractors and suppliers, extortion of students for admission and grade, which I have mentioned earlier on, and racketeering or sexual harassment or exploitation of students through the sale of handouts, which are generally fraudulently prepared. They were not as a result of the intellectual activity of the teacher or lecturer, but largely are stolen from other public materials and reproduced and then sold to the students. And sometimes if they don't buy, they bear the consequences in terms of either being failed deliberately and so on and so forth. So these are the dimensions of corruption within the education sector, and I will come back to the consequences later. But then there is corruption in the wider public sector, the way in which it affects the educational institutions. And in particular, I want to focus on three recent examples which really need to be addressed by all the anti-corruption agencies, because this is also undermining the quality of products and even the quality of the entire system. For example, there are examples of reform policies which are formulated with very good intentions, but which are often circumscribed by endemic corruption in the public sector and in their application to the education sector. And I will want to give three examples of this. The first example is the reform policy on the Procurement Act. And it's a very commendable, very worthy reform policy to deal with the issue of corruption as it affects contracts and service provisioning in the public sector. The second is the requirement by the National Assembly that vice chancellors should appear in person to defend their budgetary proposals, contrary to the previous practice in which the National Universities Commission sits with vice chancellors, listens to their budgets, they defend it, and then the NUC now takes it to the National Assembly, but now the requirement is every vice chancellor has to come physically to present his or her budget, or that of his university. And the third example is now the recent requirement that no university should recruit any staff, even to fill existing vacancies, without 3 layers of approvals from the federal bureaucracy. You have to go to NUC, you have to go to Office of the Head of Service of the Federation, and you have to go to the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. All this in conception and intention are beautiful reform programs. But as they are applied in the public sector, they have introduced new dimensions of corruption, which really have very serious negative consequences. With regards to obtaining approval prior to recruitment or replacement of staff, there is now evidence to suggest that vice chancellors have to guarantee slots of staff before what they brought is approved. So they go to all these 3 different places. Maybe they want to recruit 50 people or 100 people. By the time they go back now, the list has been grown to about 100. And most of these are not in the required critical areas, but in the so-called service sector. And it's very, very serious because it's distorting the balance that has been established with regards to the ratio of academic and non-academic staff. It compromises quality because there is no interview. Once you are given a list, you have to now come and just give them offers of admission, and this is very, very serious in the university system. The other thing about, for example, I'm very sorry, I don't want to take too much time, but there is evidence to prove this. I know one university in which, and that's how it complicates the corruption in the university system, a vice chancellor has gone with a small list, he's come back with over 200, and of course he added his own. And before you realize it, you have so much people added who will not add value to the institution. And with regards to the National Assembly, every vice chancellor has to come to defend his or her budget, and in the process, a lot of deals are made. Either your own requirements for the budget are not approved until you do deals, or if you refuse to do deals, that is cut, or if you agree, then the budget is also padded up. And there are so many examples of all that. And sometimes these padded up programs are so-called community constituency projects. And if you go to many universities, there are many of those projects that are abandoned, because the resources go to those National Assembly members who have made the deals, and in the end, the resources are not spent for the project that is supposed to be done. With regards to the issue of the Procurement Act, we have had cases in which it is required that vice chancellors, after certain threshold, which is a very significant amount, they now have to come either to the ministry or to other bodies in order to defend their proposals. And there are also cases where sometimes the due process that has been done is changed and the contract itself is changed, and this happens in most cases when councils have no properly appointed chairman, governing councils. In any case, the Procurement Act has taken a lot of powers with regards to contracts from the governing councils, even though the law has not been changed. So I am saying that these aspects of corruption, as it affects the growth and development of universities, also need to be addressed while we work very, very hard to address those aspects of corruption from within the system. If we do not have a holistic approach of addressing corruption as it impacts the education sector, then obviously a lot of challenges will remain. I have commended ICPC, AFCC, and others. They are really up and doing their best. But given the magnitude of the challenges that they face, really it's like a drop in the ocean, what they are able to do. So that is why I said we require re-strategizing, more focus and attention in order to deal with this. Education, as everybody says, is the foundation of any country's growth and development. And if we do not fund education well, or even the little funds that come into the sector are being stolen brazenly, or a lot of the practices which undermine quality, access, and integrity in the system are allowed, then obviously the entire foundation of progress and development in a country is undermined. So we really need to address this. And I have some suggestions, about 6. I may not have to mention all, but the first one I have already alluded to. It is very, very important to recognize that fighting corruption, particularly with regards to education, cannot be done in isolation. We cannot just focus on corruption within the education sector. And by the way, some of the most prominent cases of corruption that come to public light are issues related to sexual harassment, which are very, very serious and need to be addressed, but in terms of extent and magnitude, they are much, much fewer relative to the other aspects of corruption in the system. So we really need to have a holistic approach, not only to addressing all aspects of corruption within the system, but in particular focusing to those aspects of corruption from the public sector as they impact upon the education sector. Secondly, I think to fight corruption effectively, while the institutions are doing their best, we need to encourage what other countries are doing, which has given results. In this country, we have lagged behind compared to other countries in terms of mobilizing communities to have school management boards that are community-based. It's very, very important to get people of integrity from within the communities to be part of a school management committee that can monitor what is going in terms of access, in terms of quality, in terms of facilities, and the key thing is to get people of integrity. Of course, otherwise it will also become another cycle of corrupt practices. But it's very, very important. Other countries have done it. It has worked. We need to begin to do that. That is inclusiveness in terms of monitoring what goes on in the schools, ensuring the appropriated funds from the government are rightly spent, and also to a large extent minimizing some of the petty corruption that goes in, particularly at the primary, secondary, and some tertiary levels of education. So citizen involvement is very important. Thirdly, I was very pleased to hear the chairman of the ICPC speak about how increasingly tools and technology are being deployed, and this is very, very important. And there needs to be a government policy that emphasizes the increasing use of technology in this regard, whether it is with regards to budgeting or with regards to a teaching code of conduct, or with regards to performance-based contracting. I think these are very, very important to not only mitigate, but to drastically reduce corrupt practices within the education sector. And I think the fourth recommendation, which may be long-term, is what has been mandated by the United Nations itself, which is the introduction of values such as integrity and anti-corruption education in the school curricula. Again, compared to other countries, frankly, Nigeria is lagging behind. If the young ones are the future of tomorrow, so right from the elementary school, good values need to be inculcated in them. It's not rote learning, and our curricula seems to emphasize that. We need to emphasize the good values of accountability, integrity, selflessness, and eschewing corruption. And it's very, very important for this to be done. Fifthly, the culture of whistleblowing. I think we are doing very well, but we need to strengthen the legal framework that protects whistleblowers and that also provides some incentives for whistleblowing. I think we've come a long way since 2015 in terms of rewarding whistleblowers, but I think there is need to really improve the legal framework. And we need to now scale it down through publicity, public enlightenment and campaigns, so that people will know that if there are very serious issues that affect them, particularly in the education sector, they can complain about them without repercussions and indeed with some incentives for doing so. In conclusion, sir, I would like to say that the effects of corruption in the education sector undermines national capacity to develop requisite national social capital for socio-economic development. And as is very well known, no nation develops without adequate and appropriate investment in education. Regrettably, the Nigerian education sector has suffered neglect and has been chronically underfunded and has been engulfed in a crisis compounded by the impact of corruption, both from within and from the wider public sector. There are two key indices globally that are used to measure what is called the seriousness of a country with regards to education. The first one is what is called expenditure per pupil. And the second one is the percentage of budgetary expenditure allocated to education. If we use these two indices and compare them with many countries globally, we will find that Nigeria is virtually at the bottom. Yes, there is the fear if you give more resources, particularly under the present circumstances, a lot of it will be stolen. But the less you give, the more they steal it, and the more the little becomes too inadequate to satisfy what you require. So really it's very, very important to address this. We have to upscale our priority with regards to education. Although some aspects of corruption within the tertiary education sector gain prominence in public discourses, especially in the media, these reported incidences, as despicable as they truly are, pale into insignificance in contrast to the reckless theft and unprofessional and unethical conduct by public officials given the trust and responsibility of managing the education sector and the way in which they respond to other public officials from outside the public sector. The corruption that takes place within the education sector, I believe, is a dwarf mirror image of what happens in the wider Nigerian context, but with comparatively more consequences. Nonetheless, it is significant enough to attract serious attention and appropriate mitigation measures. I therefore wish to call on all the anti-corruption agencies, where they continue to do the commendable work that they have been doing, to increase the attention they pay to the tertiary education sector, more specifically, but to the state and local government tiers of governance. Because if you ask me, my guess, the statistics are not there, but my guess is that in virtually all the states in this country, less or no more than 40% of the budgeted allocations to education actually translate into educational provisioning. And that is very, very serious. Because then if primary education has no quality, there is low access, secondary education has low quality and low access, no matter how good the university is, the pipeline brings bad people into it. And it becomes very, very difficult, therefore, to train the kind of quality we need. So we need to do whatever is possible to tackle corruption generally, but to also pay particular attention to corruption in the education sector. All hands need to be on deck for a successful accomplishment of this task. May God Almighty continue to help us and guide our leaders appropriately. Thank you very much. Another round of applause for Professor Atahiru Jega, please. Thank you very much, Prof. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go into recognition and award presentation. Permit me to request that Chief Superintendent Daniel Ise Ama please step forward. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Chief Superintendent Daniel Ise Ama, when he was a superintendent of police before his promotion, did something remarkable for which he is going to be recognized today. Daniel Ise Ama is an indigene of Jos East, Plateau State. He joined the Nigerian Police Force as a cadet inspector in the year 2002, making it 20 years of service. He is currently serving as a divisional police officer in Bompai Police Station in Nasarawa, Kano State. On the 24th of April 2022, a matter was reported to him that a suspect, one Mr. Ali Zaki, convinced a Bureau de Change operator that he has $750,000 US, which he could sell to them at the rate of 430 naira to $1, to give him the equivalent of 322,500,000 naira. After a bank transaction took place, however, the suspect arranged with armed robbers to track and rob his victims while they were transporting the money. When the matter was reported to the divisional police in Kano, where SP Daniel was the DPO, he commenced investigation. In the course of the investigation, they traced the principal suspect, Mr. Ali Zaki, who offered $200,000 US to Superintendent Daniel Ise Ame, as he then was, to kill the case through a bank staff. The offer was rejected. The bank staff was promptly arrested, which led to the arrest of the principal suspect. The $200,000 US was recovered and registered as exhibit. For this act and other acts of integrity, Chief Superintendent Daniel Ise Ama is being conferred with the 2022 Public Service Integrity Award. I respectfully call on the chairman of the ICPC to please come forward and present this distinguished officer to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for this award.
Mr. President, sir, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I respectfully invite the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, to address us. Mr. President, sir.
Thank you. Please sit down. Members of the National Assembly that are here, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, the Chief of Staff, Minister of Education, Chairman of ICPC, Registrar of JAMB, Keynote Speaker, Professor Tahir Jega, Heads of Press and agencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to deliver this address on the fourth successive National Summit on Diminishing Corruption in the Public Sector that has been organized during this administration. Incidentally, it is also my last as President. The theme of this summit, corruption and the education sector, is apt, as corruption in any sector affects development. From inception, this administration has consistently made the fight against corruption a cardinal pillar of its comprehensive commitments and agenda to reform the nation. We signed up to the Open Government Partnership and adopted the Open Government Declaration, under which we committed to have robust anti-corruption policies, mechanisms, and practices that ensure transparency in the management of public finances and procurement of public finances of law. We have tried in the last 7 years to keep faith with these commitments. I am pleased to have participated in each of the previous summits organized by the current board of the ICPC under the leadership of Professor Bolaji Orosanwe, SAN, in collaboration with the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, targeting different aspects of our administration's commitment to fight corruption. This year's summit will mirror how corruption undermines education policies, investments, and create an unfriendly learning environment for our youth. Incessant strikes, especially by unions in the tertiary education, often imply that the government is grossly underfunding education. But I must say that corruption in the education system, from basic level to tertiary level, has been undermining our investment in the sector, and those who go on prolonged strikes on flimsy reasons are no less complicit. The 1999 Constitution places a premium on education by placing it on the concurrent list, thereby laying the responsibilities of budgeting and underwriting qualitative education on both the federal and state governments. The total education budget for each year is therefore a reflection of both federal and state budgets and should be viewed with other financial commitments in their totality. The allocation to education in the federal budget should not be considered their allocation to the Federal Ministry of Education and also academic institutions alone, but should include allocation to the Universal Basic Education transfers to TET fund and the fund from the education tax pool accounts to TET fund, etc. I am aware that the aggregate education budget in all the 36 states of the Federation and that of the federal government, combined with the internally generated revenues of the educational institutions themselves, are also a subject that requires the attention of critics of government funding of education. In line with the national policy on education, this administration has been implementing the homegrown school feeding program to provide a free balanced meal per day for each child that attends public primary school in order to encourage school enrollment and facilitate access to universal basic education. To mitigate the impact of security challenges on our schools, I signed the Safe Schools Declaration ratification document in December 2019. The Federal Ministry of Education followed up and developed the minimum standard for Safe Schools document in 2021, all of the Safe Schools Initiative. The Safe Schools Initiative is an expression of government's commitment to continue to work towards the protection of students, teachers, and the school environments. Government and stakeholders in the educational sector are concerned about the manifestation of various forms of corruption in our universities. For example, use different terminologies to describe different forms of corruption they experience on our campuses. There is sorting or cash for marks, grades, sex for marks, sex for grade alterations, examination malpractice, and so on. Sexual harassment has assumed an alarming proportion. Other forms of corruption include payroll padding or ghost workers, lecturers taking a full-term appointment in more than one academic institution, including private institutions, lecturers writing seminar papers, projects, and dissertations for students for a fee, and admission racketeering, to mention only the most glaring corrupt practices. I am happy to note that ICPC is investigating and prosecuting sexual harassment as abuse of power in our educational institutions. I approve and encourage them to continue to do so. Government will continue to fund education within realistically available revenue, but stakeholders, including the media, should equally advocate for transparency in the amount generated as internally generated revenue by educational institutions and how such funds are expended. Corruption in the expenditure of internally generated revenue of tertiary institutions is a matter that has strangely not received the attention of stakeholders in tertiary education, including unions. I call on stakeholders to demand accountability in the administration of academic institutions and for unions to interrogate the bloated personnel and procurement expenditure of their institutions. Let me also implore the unions to work with government to put faces and identities to names on the payroll. I believe that the role of government in education is to guarantee access and establish minimum benchmarks for quality education. Due to declining resources, government cannot bear the cost of funding education alone. I task our academics to attract endowments, research, and other grants to universities, polytechnics, and challenges of education similar to what obtains in other countries. About 2 weeks ago, I participated in the 77th United Nations General Assembly in New York. One of the key events was Transforming Education Summit Leaders Day, titled Transforming Education to Transform the World. Learn to live together sustainably. Nigeria joined other countries in committing to the vision of education for sustainable development and to the objectives of the greening education participation and building education systems that foster ethical and socially responsible global citizens who actively contribute to the sustainable development goals. That is a vision which we will continue to aspire and build. I congratulate the sole winner of this year's Public Service Integrity Award, Superintendent Daniel Ise Ama. I also commend the Chairman ICPC, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and the Registrar of JAMB for organizing this summit and bringing together the three arms of government, MDAs, and other stakeholders to deliberate on corruption in the educational sector of Nigeria. I therefore look forward to the outcomes and recommendations of this summit. I am sure that the ICPC and the Office of the Secretary of the Government will bring forward the recommendation for appropriate action. It is my singular honor and privilege to declare this summit open. Thank you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Mr. President, sir, permit me to call on the chairman of the ICPC, Professor Bolaji Owasoye, as he makes a presentation of the Anti-Corruption Icon Award to His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Professor Owasoye, sir. With the permission of His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I call on all members and secretary, the chairman, members and secretary of the ICPC to please come forward for a group photograph with the President. Thereafter, we will have some other dignitaries who will join them. But for now, the chairman, members and secretary of the ICPC, please come forward. Honorable members of the ICPC, please, you come up. Come up. Members of the ICPC, please come up. While I call on the chairman of the NDLEA, Professor Akahiri Jaga, the registrar of JAM, the secretary to the government of the Federation. Okay, they all know themselves.
NTA, you can't be Deutsch.
Information is power. Everyone wants power. To feel powerful with the NTA News Model app, the one-stop information center, real news at your fingertip. Be the first to report by uploading first-hand information on the U-Report link, and be the first to know by simply clicking on any of the links on the sidebar for headlines, domestic and foreign news, economy, security, politics, sports, and more. Stream live on your smartphone and tablets and stay connected. It's pretty easy. Simply download NTA News app from your Google Play Store and you're good to go. NTA News mobile app, your access to real-time information.
From dusk to dawn, 24 hours a day, NTA International is with you in your living room, office, everywhere and anywhere. We provide the company you desire in terms of balanced and up-to-date news, programs, and the best of entertainment. Tune in to DSTV channel 251, GoTV channel 91, Freeview UK channel 264, or you can download www.visiontv.co.uk. App for iOS or Android. You can also see us on Facebook and YouTube for quality content on the go. NTA International, Africa's window to the world.
Information is power. Everyone wants power. So feel powerful with the NTA News Mobile app, the one-stop information center. Real news at your fingertip. Be the first to report by uploading first-hand information on the U-Report link, and be the first to know by simply clicking on any of the links on the sidebar for headlines, domestic and foreign news, economy, security, politics, sports, and more. Stream live on your smartphone and tablets and stay connected. It's pretty easy. Simply download NTA News app from your Google Play Store and you're good to go. NTA News mobile app, your access to real-time information.
And welcome to another amazing edition of your weekend.
I'm telling you, oh, it has to be heat, it has to be steamy, it has to be hot. But we decided that, somebody has to tell a story that is family oriented.
Welcome to another edition of Talking Movie.
Almost everyone he ever cared about.
See, when you say pour out, you can't call water. See, because you don't excavate water.
This is a #1 program, Gallery.
Do you love to gist or gossip?
It is extremely wrong. And we love it.
Hello everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Whip and Grill.
Welcome to the slant today, where we say it as it is and we get to enjoy ourselves talking about various things that are happening in our society.
One 6 packs. And your job still remains as the man. Protect the woman, to project the woman.